as good a news that could possibly have happened. I mean, this is as good as it could be for Fubo. Judge temporarily blocks sports streaming service Venue, ruling in favor of, I mean, talk about a David and Goliath situation, ruling in favor of Fubo TV on antitrust concerns. A U.S. judge temporarily blocked media companies Disney, Warner Brothers, and Fox from launching their sports streaming service Venue, according to court filings. The temporary injunction granted in response to a lawsuit brought by Fubo TV comes just weeks ahead of the start of the NFL season. The companies had planned to launch their service by that date. The lawsuit brought by Fubo, an internet TV bundle akin to traditional pay TV packages. Why did they describe it as that? They should have described it as a streaming company similar to YouTube TV. But who owns CNBC? Who owns CNBC? So, a very strange way to describe Fubo, CNBC, but okay. Quote, we respectfully disagree with the court's ruling and are appealing it, the company said on a joint statement on Friday. We believe that Fubo's arguments are wrong on the facts and the law, and that Fubo has failed to prove it is legally entitled to a preliminary injunction. Venue Sports is a pro-competitive option that aims to enhance consumers' choice by reaching a segment of viewers who currently are not served by existing. I mean, it's just a bunch of baloney, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they want to eliminate as many potential competitors as possible, so then they just have a monopoly on this, right? Them and YouTube TV. If it's just them and YouTube TV, and those are your two options to get like a modern TV package, I mean, night-night. Because we know them and YouTube are in like this because YouTube's owned by Google, right? So, of course, they'd want to eliminate any, Fubo's just a problem for them. Fubo's just in the way, right? And so they would love to eliminate Fubo. They would love Fubo to go bankrupt. It creates way less competition for them long term, and then they could just go up like crazy on price, and people would have no choice but to pay. Because where else are you going to go at that point in time? Because you got to understand, these three companies alone, they own a massive amount of the sports content. So if you watch any sort of sports, basketball, football, baseball, anything like that, and you got to understand, you're going to have to likely go through these three companies. Otherwise, you're not going to have access to it. So if all it's them is YouTube TV and these guys, whoo, I mean, it's going to be bad for the consumer long term. And that's the argument Fubo made. I'm certainly no lawyer, but I know a few things about the law, and I felt like this was a situation that Fubo had a pretty decent probability of winning, right? Now, from here, Venue can take this, from my understanding, to a smaller court, okay? And they're going to potentially try to win in that court. But my opinion is, first off, that's going to take a long time to do that. So even if they were to win, could they launch in 2025 at some point in time? Maybe. That's if they won. Now, I would say fairly low probability they win in a lower court. And the reason being is they already lost in Big Dog, right? And they already put their best cards on the table. Everybody put their best cards on the table in this situation, right? Because this was the big one. Like, you got to come in and win this one. No different than if Fubo lost this today, I think it would be very hard for Fubo to then go win this in a lower court. So, because everybody's putting their best cards on the table. This is all the facts. This is all the, how we view this, right? And so you're not going to magically pull a rabbit out of the hat now in a lower court, right? So now you kind of are kind of hoping a little bit on luck that things are going to work in your favor, which it's always a potential, right? But I would call it a pretty low probability. Like, this was the big one. Like, this is, we're talking about they had to go to a federal court for this situation. This is Big Dog. Now, in regards to Fubo, right? I mean, don't be surprised if the stock goes to $3 to $4 range quickly here now at this point in time, right? Because now we talk about Venues out of the way for at least likely this year. And so if this Venue even ever comes together, which, I think it's a rather low probability now at this point in time, if it even ever comes together, you're looking at probably a 2025 or 2026 launch. But I think there's, if I had to put odds on it, I would say there's probably a 20% probability that Venue ever actually gets to launch, and probably 80% now at this point in time of them never launching. Whereas if I went back 24 hours ago, I felt like there was probably like a 50-50. Like it was a coin flip, or maybe like a 60-40, like a little better in Fubo's favor than these guys' favor, in my opinion, right? So This is a very positive development here for Fubo, right? Now, in regards to Fubo's latest earnings, they came out with, what was that, a couple weeks ago, right? If we look at their total revenues, they went to $390 million from 312. So the revenues clearly continues to scale up and move in the right direction. If we look at their subscribers-related expenses, that was certainly up year over year, but it wasn't up nearly as much as revenues were up, which is something you like to see. So they brought down their operating loss to $35 million from $52 million. That's definitely very, very good there. Very, very good. And then if we look at their loss from continuing operations before income taxes, that was a $25 million loss there versus 54. So Fubo, everything in the financials is going the right direction, right? And simultaneously, we have this lawsuit going in Fubo's direction as well. Now, as far as could Fubo ever get compensation from these guys, it's a potential still that Fubo could get some sort of litigation expenses covered. Like we'll see where all that shakes out. That I'm not really counting on. And I think the main thing for Fubo is I don't think that it's necessarily about them making a bunch of money from a lawsuit against these guys. I think the bigger factor here is I think Fubo just wanted the service blocked, right? Which makes sense because then these guys could charge Fubo insane prices and just basically eliminate Fubo, right? Like throw ridiculous pricing at Fubo that Fubo would then have to pay. They wouldn't be able to pay it, right? Which means their service would be less competitive, which means ultimately they would end up kind of slowly getting eliminated, right? Or at least that's kind of the ugly way of looking at it, but it was a serious potential. So now if this gets blocked, the other thing you got to understand that this is really positive for Fubo with is now these companies are going to actually fear Fubo a little bit in terms of if they go in, Fubo negotiates with these companies all the time for sports streaming rights and for channels, right? If now these companies try to charge some crazy price to Fubo, right? Fubo's going to potentially take that to court. They're going to potentially expose these things and whatnot, right? And so now, at this point in time, these guys, I think this is probably the most level playing field Fubo's probably ever gotten now at this point in time, kind of moving forward here. So definitely steps in the right direction. Hey, it's Jeremy. I hope you really enjoyed watching that clip here today. What you're looking at in front of you right there, that's 1000xstocks.com. That's my advanced software that I've been working in the background creating for a long time. This software is so much more advanced than what others are presenting out there in the market. And as somebody that's been in the market 15 years, I want to create something that was simple, that had exactly everything I needed to make my judgments on companies, such as forward P ratios, 2-year out forward P ratios, price to sales ratios, forward price to sales ratios. I wanted the ability to be able to compare different companies versus each other. I wanted to be able to compare a Meta versus a Google versus an Apple and be able to see all those different metrics laid out all next to each other. I wanted a service that I could listen to conference calls right through and even be able to toggle and adjust the speed I wanted to listen to those conference calls. I wanted a service that I could search SEC filings right through. I wanted the ability to do that all in one service, and that is exactly what I've created with 1000xstocks.com. If you want to apply for access to this, go to the description area of this video. You can click that link and go ahead and apply for access to this. If you don't want to do that, you can go to 1000xstocks.com. Enjoy. Cheesecake. This is, I took these pictures, I think it was either yesterday or the day before. I posted them in the private stock group, right? It said new flower child in North Italia being built in Henderson, Nevada. Should open this winter, in my opinion. What is this? Came seems to be, so basically what they're doing is they're opening a lot of these flower childs in North Italias right next to each other, I've noticed. And I noticed that here in Vegas. I also noticed that in Phoenix. And it's actually a pretty smart strategy. And they kind of like bring a lot of traffic right to a new area and by building them right close to each other because both of them do big volumes of people. And you know what's interesting is if you look at Chipotle, like why has Chipotle been such a great stock over time, right? Obviously, they had a great just overall business model, right? And back in the day, their food was such high quality, it was like amazing. It's not as high quality now. It's still like good compared to most places, but let's be honest, like back in the day was special. Chipotle 10 years ago, you guys don't know about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Chipotle, that was special back then. But why has Chipotle stock done so great? There's a few core reasons why the stock's been such a tremendous performer, and this is why it leads into where Cheesecake's headed with the flower child concept. The reason is Chipotle can open small locations. Now, when you open small locations, you can put them a lot more places, right? Think about Starbucks also. Another great example of small locations. You can fit them in places that, honestly, you wouldn't be able to fit a large Cheesecake Factory, let's say, restaurant, right? Cheesecake Factory needs a huge amount of land. It needs a huge building, right? Chipotle, small locations, very small locations, doesn't cost a lot to build those locations out either. High margin products, high margins, streamlined. If you think about their products, I mean, very streamlined. Chipotle, you can get a bowl a ton of different ways, but at the end of the day, you're only picking from a few different options, right, to make that combination. So it's a very streamlined business, and it reminds me a lot of Flower Child, because when you go to Flower Child, I see a lot of the same glimpses. It's not quite the same ordering where it's like, I want rice, I want beans, right? But it's very similar in terms of, you look at the menu, you say you want this or want that, right? And you got a few options. You can get chicken, you can get steak, you can get salmon, you can get shrimp, or you can just have your meal like vegetarian style. And so it reminds me a lot of Chipotle. And I'm looking at the size of this location they're building here in Henderson. It's not a huge location, but I would almost guarantee you they're going to do crazy volume out of there. Crazy to-go business. Crazy to-go business. I bet you that inside's going to be packed the majority of the time, and so, but it's a small location, and so I think that concept is going to evolve like a little miniature Chipotle is kind of what I'm thinking here. Now you may say, how do I feel comfortable buying a stock like Cheesecake? Because this is one of my favorite stocks I've been buying here over this year, and honestly, I would love to keep buying Cheesecake for the next year or two. You may say, how can I feel comfortable with that? All the recession worries out there. What if we have the big unemployment cycle in the next year or two? Like, oh my gosh, Cheesecake, not good, right? I feel very comfortable. If we look at Chipotle, Cheesecake, before they own North Italia and Flower Child and all these new great concepts that are going to perform tremendous regardless of kind of the market, just back when it was only Cheesecake Factory, look at the net income this company produced, even in what would be considered very bad economic years, right? $42 million of net income, $81 million in net income, $95 million in net income, $98 million. And that was when they just owned Cheesecake Factory. And that was super high unemployment rates back then, right? And not a good economy. And yet Cheesecake still put up those numbers. This was before food delivery was a big thing and all that stuff, right? So this is food for thought, no pun intended. And that's how I feel so comfortable buying a stock like Cheesecake. Another reason is I'm not scared about a recession in regards to Cheesecake. One, they've proven before they can still make great money even in a recession, right? Two, guess what? If you do actually have a recession, guess what's going to become a lot cheaper? And keep in mind, there's two concepts that they're going to build out in mass over this next 10 years. One's North Italia, the other's Flower Child, right? Both, in my opinion, are going to 200 plus locations. So if not Flower Child, maybe it might go to 500 long term. We'll see, right? If you have a recession, land gets cheaper. It's beautiful. Building gets cheaper in a recession. Workers are readily available in a recession, right? Because you could have a lot of layoffs. And so guess what? Also, workers are very available. And guess what? You also get your permits faster. One of the things that's actually held back Cheesecake from opening more locations over the past year or so is permits. Like getting the state, getting the local government to get our permits and get this thing built, because there's been so much building going on, right? If suddenly you have a major slowdown, then the state starts to look and say, we got to start approving stuff faster. We got to get these permits out there, right? So recession, it doesn't scare me with the stock like that. Like, okay, let's say their comp store restaurant sales go negative in the short term. Is it going to stay that way? No, it never does, right? You come out of the recession, then all of a sudden your comp restaurant sales go crazy over the next few years. And meanwhile, you're able to pick up land for cheaper, build a bunch more locations, workers are available, permits are better. That doesn't scare me at all, just to be quite frank, right? If anything, if anything that scares me in regards to Cheesecake, it would be like some huge new inflation cycle where everything went crazy in terms of price again. But the only way you're going to get that is to get the same dynamic to happen that happened back in 2020, 2021. Massive stimulus, all types of supply chain disruptions, right? Government shutdowns, and just, a whole crazy situation. So it's just unrealistic to see that again. And, as Chet told me a long time ago, back in the day when I worked at Quick Trip, he said, you never waste a recession. Never waste a recession, right? And Quick Trip was always in the business of buying land, building more and more locations. Never waste a recession. So that's how I feel comfortable. That's how I feel comfortable with the stock like that. Speaking about comfort, PayPal, baby. We're starting to roll on PayPal. Up $4,500 here today. Up 11.11%. Hey, that's a great sign. So hit $21,000 up in regards to PayPal. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. Check out this chart. Look at this chart. The 1 month chart. PayPal's actually running its own race, and it is so good to see. It's so good to see. If we look at the past month, PayPal stock's up about 16.5%. The S&P 500's up 1% in the past month. The Nasdaq's basically flat in the past month. This is ideal. I mean, no. Take into consideration, what if the S&P 500 in the past month, what if it was up 3%? What if it was up 4% in the past month? Like how much would PayPal be up in that situation? So the fact that this stock's starting to run its own race means to me that investors are starting to view PayPal as a special story stock and the type of stock you want to position into. If this stock was only, like let's say it was only up 1% in the past month, I'd be like, okay, Wall Street doesn't see it, right? It's clear as day Wall Street's starting to understand this story. They're starting to understand the stock. They're starting to understand what Alex Chris has going on, his running of the business. And that's why the stock just continues to go up and up and up, despite these indexes not really doing great here recently, right? And so if these indexes do kick into gear, right, imagine what PayPal's going to do in that situation. You'll see PayPal $80, $90 quick in regards to that. So this is beautiful to see PayPal start, and this should have happened a while ago, but it took a while for Wall Street to really come around to what's going on here with PayPal. Now, keep in mind, in regards to PayPal, I think it's going to get a lot more fun over the next 12 months, especially if we don't have a recession. If we don't have that big unemployment cycle in this next year, PayPal's going to get a lot more fun, right? Because rates are coming down, that's going to be seen as very favorable to all the fintech companies. And PayPal obviously gets put in the fintech category, right? So that's going to be a huge boost for its stock price. Additionally, the more its stock price goes up, the more these bearish analysts that have these very bearish prices are going to have to bring up those price targets, right? They're going to get more constructive on the stock as well, right? Which means they could go from a hold on the stock to a buy, or a buy to a strong buy, those sorts of things, or from a sell to a hold, which is going to be very positive for the stock as well. Then if Alex Chris and the team come in with great numbers again when they report, which they probably won't report earnings again until, I would say, either October or November. Whew. I mean, could you see the stock at $100 before the year end? I don't know. We'll see. But Don't take it out of the realm of possibility, because this is a divergent story now at this point in time. Speaking about divergent stories, Palantir. Oh my gosh. Palantir. This stock, it can't stop going up. It can't stop going up. It's unbelievable. We're now up 267% on the stock. I mean, this is that stage I start wishing I owned more shares of this stock. I just do. I start wishing I own more shares, and I do own more Palantir shares than this. This is just in a public account, but still, like, I wish I had even a bigger position. But we got to remember, before we go on to what's going to happen with Palantir from here, right? We got to remember that Palantir was scary days. If we go back 2.5 years ago, there was a lot to be worried about in regards to Palantir. The growth rates kept getting worse. They were losing money back then. It was an ugly story. The margins weren't impressive. They didn't really have any excitement around the business model, and all that changed. The margins have obviously increased massively. Growth came back in a massive way. They flipped to profitability, and they're just getting more and more profitable. They're starting to become an ATM machine of a company, right? Obviously, there's an insane amount of hype in regards to their specific products and where they fit in the marketplace, which, is still very early days. Remember, AIP was just launched last year. Like, think about where AIP is going to be. Think about where Foundry is going to be 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now. Also, remember, a company like Palantir, they're always investing in their business. They're going to come out with new future products and services that we don't even see today. That could be the next AIP after that, right? The next huge whatever. It's a very special DNA at that company. They got one of the most talented. I mean, one of the things that gave me conviction around Palantir back in the day, other than the balance sheet, is actually their workforce. And I'm not just talking about Alex Karp. I'm talking about their actual workforce. And I heard from a lot of people that were inside the industry that said, getting hired at Palantir, much more difficult than getting hired at Google or Meta or a lot of the other big tech companies. Like, you get hired at those places a lot easier than getting hired at Palantir. And Palantir was like a level above. And so they got a special group over there. And remember, your company is your workforce, right? And so as they continue to build that sales force out and get that better and better, can you imagine where this company's growth is going to be 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now versus where it is today? Because Palantir focused so much of their attention for the longest time really just on like engineers, the type of folks that will build the products rather than the folks that will sell the products, right? And Palantir now can focus a lot more on not just building the products, but selling the products. And so that's a beautiful thing. They got the relationship with Microsoft now. I mean, just there's so much going on with Palantir, it's impossible to keep track of it all. And so this is a very special stock. And here's a 2-year chart of Palantir versus S&P 500. Palantir is up over 300%, S&P 500 up 35% over the past 2 years. So keep in mind, Palantir's nearly 10x the S&P 500 returns, right? And I'll just say this. This is why we love stock picking right here. This is why we absolutely love it. And this is why I listen to conference calls on 1000x.com at 2 a.m. Because when you find these sorts of stocks and you find these sorts of opportunities and you make the money, right, it is a great feeling. And it's a great amount of money, right? Like we're talking about, you can completely change your return profiles, which can completely change your financial life. When you're talking about completely changing your financial life because you change your return profile, you could be talking about driving different cars, living in different homes, your kids go to school at different places, right? You're able to go to different types of restaurants and other folks. You're able to go on vacations that, you wouldn't be able to go on otherwise. You're able to live life more on your own terms. You could retire early. Like, there's an immense amount of opportunities. That's why we do this. A lot of people don't get it. Like, why wouldn't you just buy an S&P 500 index fund? Why stay up late, listen to conference calls? Why put in the work researching stocks? Why do this? Why do you think an NFL player's willing to get his head bashed in? Going over the middle and get smashed? Because the money's really good. That's why I'm willing to stay up to 2 a.m. listening to a conference call. Because the money's really good. It's really freaking good, okay? And so it's important you understand that. It pays different. You live a different type of lifestyle, right? So, why is an Olympian willing to dedicate their whole life to this thing that I'm going to do, right? Why is LeBron James dedicated his whole life to playing basketball? Well, he probably loves playing basketball, but I'm sure he also likes making $40 million a year or whatever he gets to play basketball, right? Like, come on, man. And so when you go to the Cheesecake Factory, you could drive this or you could drive this. Both are going to get you there, right? Or should get you there. But one's just a little bit more fun than the other, right? I mean, if I had to pick, I think I'm picking this one. And I think you are too, okay? If we're just going to be honest, can we be honest with each other for a moment? And then after your date, you can pull up to this house, you can pull up to the 1-bedroom, or you can pull up to, the basement with your mom's house or whatever. It's up to you. We all have choices in life. That's the beautiful thing about life. We all have choices. You pick your choices.